2018, she completed a mid-career PhD in ancient Indian chemistry, Ayurvedic pharmaceutics, and pharmacology from the prestigious Banaras Hindu University in India, focusing her award-winning PhD thesis on polyherbal mineral formulations for diabetes. She was elected as a 2018 to 2023 Fulbright specialist in public health, specializing in integrative medicine and continues studying with authentic wise men. The Discovery Channel documentary Healers Journey into Ayurveda features her work, and her book Everyday Ayurveda is the national bestseller published by Penguin Random House. In today's session, Dr. Bhattacharya will discuss foods and their impact on our emotional, intellectual, and physical bodies. So can we please welcome Dr. Bhattacharya? Please join the session. Namaste, Dr. Bhattacharya. Thank you so much for being a part of Ayush Talks and the Center for Ayurveda Studies.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. And the work you're doing at Indica Yoga is also very inspiring. And indeed, everything at Indica Academy is inspiring. So for any of you who are interested in Indian knowledge systems, please go to indica.in, which is probably where you registered, and find out more. There's so much to learn. Today, we're going to talk about Ayurveda and food, but we're not going to talk about it just as food. We're going to talk about it from kind of a yoga perspective, simply because when Sophia and I were discussing how to set up the session, we were not thinking about Ayurvedic physicians or people who are already experts at food, nutritionists, dietitians, and various people in the food industries. We were thinking about the layperson and the yoga health enthusiast or fitness enthusiast who is asking certain questions about food and quality. So we decided to name this talk Quality Food and Qualities of Food. And that is because also, as I was learning, both as a medical doctor and then as an Ayurveda person, learning the subject of medical science, that's Ayurveda, I started asking, well, how come Ayurvedic doctors don't eat well? How come modern medical doctors don't eat well? How come the patients that are getting Ayurvedic prescriptions think that the food part of it is less important and just taking those pills or the herbals or the oils is more important? Maybe they don't understand about quality food. So as we begin, I always begin with namaste to my gurus and thanks, because of them choosing that I was worthy enough to learn the information that they taught me. I was able to actually do some thinking, critical thinking about what is possible in nutrition. And you won't find most of this information in one field because there's a lot of conflicts between people. So these are the people in my conventional Western training, and these are the people in my Ayurvedic training, and of course my mother in the middle. So some of you do remember that I gave a series. It was a pretty long series at Indica Courses, and we're actually thinking of doing it again. It's a live cohort as part of the Indica Courses series. This one 2 years ago was called Conscious Diet, the Conscious Diet, Plant-Based Ayurvedic Nutrition. So if you were in that group, you can put something in the chat so I know that you're here. We had 125 students in that class, and we went through a whole bunch of topics there. And I'm going to just show you some of them because we're going to cover some of them if they come up in questions. Sophia is fielding the questions, and we're going to have some time for Q&A, hopefully. And the overview of that course was, what are the qualities in foods? We defined quality foods. We talked about plant-based nutrition, what is not plant-based, and we did some interesting polls in the group. And what we found is that most people actually do not understand what plant-based nutrition is. They do not understand what vegetarian means. Some people think they know what veg and non-veg mean, but actually there are a lot of different definitions. And we moved into how Ayurveda perceives food and nutrition. And we came up with these terms, which I will also introduce today: Ayurvedic Ahara, Anna, Bhojana, Patya, Apatya, Hita, Ahita, and Kala Bhojana. And in the conscious diet side of the course, we talked about the yoga, what are foods and what are food groups, not only according to Ayurveda, but according to the way that energetics looks at the foods. And so that was an overview of the course. And I'll I'm happy to take questions from that as well. But what we're going to talk about today is food and quality of food and qualities in food and what quality food means. Because you know that in advertisements and various restaurants, they say, oh, come and eat quality food. How do you decide what quality food is? So I asked the basic question, definition. What is food quality and what are qualities in foods? Do you define, if someone says, well, what are the qualities? What are the gunas, or what are the, I guess guna is the best word. We can also use tattva, but what are the gunas in the food? Most people will say, oh, well, how do you mean? You mean by taste? Well, the quality is that it's acidic, or it's sour, or it's sweet, or it's bitter, or it's salty. Any of you who know Ayurveda know that I'm doing these out of order. In order, it's sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, astringent. These are the 6 different qualities or tastes. Does rasa mean taste? It's a mistranslation. Rasa actually refers to the entire experience of food, where you have learned to taste that food and what impression was given to you around that food. So that when you taste the food again, you have a particular impression or judgment about that food. So the better word would be something closer to flavor. And so that includes the actual physical sensation, but also up in your brain what happens. And so the quality of the food might be for you something that's bad food, good food, or in terms of the qualities you think of taste. So they may not even be those 6 that I mentioned. They may be something else. Like you might say, well, I don't know what pungent is, but I know what mirch. Mirch is a Hindi word that means hot, spicy. And in the West, they will say spicy. And so in India, spicy can mean cumin, coriander, but in America, anything that puts a bite in the food, it can be even hot, black pepper, much less hot pepper. That's called spicy. So these qualities by taste have different words. If you're in Japan, they'll say umami. Umami is a taste that is something like a astringent and a pungent. And in the neuroscience world, they talk about the glutamate receptor being stimulated. And so that's what taste is in those cultures that understand umami. If you go in to ask someone else and say, well, how do you define qualities in food? Someone may say, oh, you mean by carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? Those are called macromolecules. Macromolecules are considered to be the biochemical foundation of foods, and modern medicine, naturopathy, nutrition, like certified nutritionists, as well as dietitians will talk about the basic fat, carbohydrate, and protein, as though the energy, if you take a particular food and you burn it in a closed oven so you can capture all the energy in there, that energy, 8 calories, 4 calories, 6 calories, those are going to tell you how nutritious or how energetic the food is. After they discovered carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, they also came up with vitamins, minerals, and a couple of other micromolecules, which are sometimes called trace elements. So someone might say, oh yeah, that's how we define the qualities in the food. But if you move into the Indian continent of traditional Indian sciences, people will talk about food in terms of energy. And so the words that you must know are, here's the abbreviation SRT. It's sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic food. So what are sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic foods? So we can just talk about it now. Sattvic food is food that is considered to be harmonious. It is going to bring you in a higher state of awareness of your entire environment. And whatever you eat is part of the energetic flow of your body. So if you want it to flow in a very harmonious, and you can say, I'm trying to avoid all Christian, Judeo, Western, Abrahamic words. Without saying good or bad, we can say that sattvic food is that which puts you into your best optimal state of awareness and also goodness. Oh, I used the word good, in harmony. Okay, so harmony with your ka. What is ka? Ka is your akash, the container in which your molecules are existing. including your Atma, your Chetana. So that sense of being in harmony in that space of your being, which includes your physical body, your mind, your senses, as well as your Atma. All of that being in harmony, being promoted to be in better harmony is sattva. So sattvic food is that which is going to make your body, mind, spirit more in tune with and in harmony with all those components. Rajasic food is considered to be the dynamic element. Everyone has some rajas, some tamas, because they're in the physical world, and they have some sattva. Sattvic food is going to promote you toward that dynamic. It's also used by people who have to be in the physical world. So a young mother who would like to escape but needs to stay in her family and take care of her kids, right? So she can't just leave. She needs to have some rajasic food. A warrior has to do it. Anyone that needs to live in the physical world, in society, leaders, warriors, caretakers, as well as people that are serving society in a physical way, they need to take care of the world. And that is actually their dharma. That is part of what they need to do to be in balance with the world that they are living in, the dharma, right? The life purpose or the alignment with their purpose for coming into this world. They need to have some rajasic food. And I'll give you examples in a moment. Then there's tamasic food. Tamasic food, so tamas is that which takes you out of harmony with what's going on in your environment. It separates you. So each one of us every day, hopefully, does something tamasic, and that's called sleeping. We exit what's going on in the live world and we move into this place where we are not, well, I won't say aware, but we are not engaged with the physical world. And sleep is something that people need for about a third of their day. So that kind of tamas is actually quite necessary to the human existence. So tamas is also part of our needed life. Now, when we go into yoga, most people will say, oh, let's be completely sattvic. I just want to be sattvic. And I remind people, it's not great to be sattvic 100% of the time. You'll never sleep. So when you think about foods to make you either more harmonious or more dynamic or more disengaged, think about what those are. Ayurveda has already discussed those. Yoga discusses some of those. So in yoga, they don't eat certain foods and do eat others. I'm going to give you an overall generalized picture, even though every person has slightly different tweaks of what will make them aligned. So sattvic foods in general are things which are grown on trees and do not have, they're pure plant kingdom. So fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, seed oils, and what am I missing? Legumes, which are plant proteins. And I think some of the sweeteners that are plant sugars, like the cane, which we call ikshu in Sanskrit, or in Bengali, we call it ak. Beets, beetroot sugar, dates, so date palm trees that have those khajur dates, or nalan gur, the sweetener that comes from dates. These are all considered to be sattva. I might have missed one, so if you have any questions, put it into the chat and I can confirm for you. I'm just going mentally through the different food groups. And I will show you those food groups in a moment. The second section is not sattva, but rajas. The rajasic foods are things that will make you more dynamic and will tend to heat you up and give you that energy. Sometimes that energy is not what you want because you're already hot inside, but sometimes it's very, very needed. So onions and garlic are considered to be the two tamasic, but all the other heating foods are considered to be rajasic. So ginger, I know you'll say ginger and garlic are both roots, but ginger, turmeric, many of the heating foods are considered to be rajasic. Let's talk about tamasic first so we can get that out of the way, because that's what most people know well. Onions and garlic I already mentioned because they do create a lot of rajas, but in many places they say that it actually disturbs us inside. It increases our vibrations and makes us a little bit agitated. And so instead of only being rajas, many consider it also to be tamasic. Some will say, well, it grows under the earth and that's why it's tamasic. Meats are tamasic. Mushrooms, which tend to take organic things and bring them into the inorganic world, or inorganic things like soils that are having minerals and bring them into the organic world. Mushrooms are sometimes considered to be very tamasic. And those foods are going to affect us. So if you just go with the simple mathematical addition formula that 3 + 2 = 5, the 2 adds to 3 and increases the number to 5. In the same way, if you add more rajas to your already rajas self, you're going to become more rajasic. You're going to become more heated up, more dynamic, but also more egoistic, more like a king. You know, the word Maharaja. Raja is like a rajas, and Raja, actually, Raja and Raja, the vowel changes slightly based on the part of speech you're using. So rajasic food is dynamism increasing. Tamas, if you eat more tamas food, it'll disengage you, but it'll also make you more disharmonious. So you may say, I'm very much engaged, but I feel like fighting. I feel like arguing. I feel like violence is going on. That is very tamasic. People who are sometimes mentally ill or on the verge of mental illness with anxiety and too much vata kind of staying in their brain, they will oftentimes eat these tamasic foods and find that it makes them a little bit more disengaged, and they don't have control of their own mind over their own body. Alcohol will do this. Some of the drugs like opium and THC and cannabis, alcohol like sura, like beer, wine, and hard liquors will do this. And these are all considered to be tamasic. In very small amounts, they can be rajasic, but it's such a small amount that most people do not engage only at that level. So these are the big categories of sattva, rajas, and tamas in terms of food. And as Sophia was telling me, Vedanta tells us that the food ingredients have sattva, rajas, and tamas, but so do our thoughts. So let's say you spend a lot of time thinking about someone you really dislike, let's say an enemy or one of your siblings or some relative that did something to your family. If you spend a lot of your time in those shadripus, the 6 ripus, the 6 kind of enemies of the mind, you will find that your mind is much more tamasic. It's disharmonious, it's vengeful. So those 6 are, let's see, I guess I'll start with lobha and moha, matsya, kama, krodha, dvesha, and of course I'm missing the last one. Maybe someone can put it in the chat. But these in English translate to anger, krodha. Kama is excess desire and passion for something, sometimes sex, sometimes something else. Usually we know the word kama in English as sexual desire. Moha is passion, but it can also in some of the regional languages refer to sexual appetite. Dvesha is a kind of aversion, but it can also be translated as hatred. Jealousy is there. So in Hindi, we say irshya. And these negative emotions will create more tamas in the person. If they're in that place of being very tamasic, and then they eat a lot of onions, they eat a lot of meat, they eat a lot of these mushrooms, they will find that they actually get heated up more inside, but that anger tends to build up, that the negative emotions that I just discussed tend to build up. And so many people are told to avoid those things. Who are these many people? When people become monks or nuns, they're often told to move toward Brahma, toward Brahmacharya, right? Chara is to move or to travel towards. Brahma is the oneness. And so Brahmacharya actually doesn't mean not having sex or celibacy. It actually means moving toward Brahma and disengaging from these kind of bodily desirous actions. So Brahmacharya is a time when people are urged not to eat a lot of rajasic and tamasic foods. And what they will focus on are eating fruits, no heavy fried foods. Dairy, if it's cow, milk, and unprocessed foods, very simply kept. And they will have upavasa, which is fasting, quite regularly. We talk about Purnima, which is a full moon, and Ekadashi, and Amavasya, which is the new moon. Ekadashi is the 11th day after the full moon or after the new moon. So these are often times when people will just not have anything, and that will clean out their, their digestive enzymes will clean out what's left as residues in their body. Because of these routines given to monks, many people said, well, I should eat that way because I'm going to be more clean. I'll be more engaged with the sattva, the goodness of life. I'll be more of a yogini or a yogi. So that's how I'm going to eat too. So what does Ayurveda say? And so as we turn from the yogic lifestyle, the monk lifestyle, where we're supposed to be eating more sattvic foods because we're not engaging with the outside world, we're kind of withdrawing and spending more of our time moving inside in the spiritual world, we can eat those other foods. But if you're living in, let's say you're in the army, or you're a warrior, or you're a king, is it possible for you to just eat sattvic foods? Sometimes you're going to need those rajasic foods. And people living in today's world in modern cities oftentimes find that they just have to eat rajasic foods because that's what's available. So what happens to our thoughts? Our thoughts also move away from sattva, and we have time where we are engaged with gossip at the office and desires and greed and things that bring us way over to those qualities that really aren't such a wonderful thing. Is that true for everyone? No. There are people that can eat different kinds of foods, but are so strong in their mental alignment of their mind, their body, their senses, and their soul that they're able to just take the foods and digest them, but not take the energy from them. To be able to do that takes a lot of ability, a lot of concentration. Most people just eat and they're not even aware of any of it. So then the question next is, well, how does the food that I take in affect my emotional body, my intellectual, and my physical body? And to know more about that, you have to actually go into each of the food groups and learn the different. So one of the great questions that Sophia asked me was, well, how do Indian ingredients and foods affect the buddhi, the intelligence? Because, hey, I'd like to have more intelligence. I'd like to be more connected with what's going on intellectually and inside of me. And I think that would be easier if I knew what foods are affecting me and keeping me from being able to engage in that buddhi and bring me more into my emotional self or into my lethargic self, right? So what should I eat and what should I avoid? She also asked if spices create rajas because of their heat and their dynamism, then why are they such a part of Indian culture? Because we think of Indian culture as being, everyone's a saint, everyone's a monk. But obviously, that that's not true. Just in terms of spices, we know that some spices were brought from different parts of Akhand Bharat. So they're not all from the Malabar coast where, the black pepper comes from, and many of the very nice species of different spices. The best species of many different spices grow all throughout India and Akhand Bharat, which went from Afghanistan through the Indian subcontinent down and around to Indian islands, Indonesia, and around to Cambodia. So a lot of these Indonesian islands and Southeast Asia have ingredients that we've incorporated into Indian food, but they came much long after many of the philosophies were already developed by the Indian philosophical systems such as the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Vedanta, and even Ayurveda, much less the Vedas. So if we think about how many different invaders came into India and left their cuisines here, that's another answer to why there are so many Indian ingredients that we think of as Indian, but they're not. So in your mind, think of some examples that are things we have in Indian cooking today, but they're not actually Indian from native, this land. One includes the pepper, the hot pepper. It came from Portugal. It came from Portugal, and actually some came from Portugal from the Americas. Chocolate came from the Andes and came over to Europe and stayed there, but it's actually not even native to Europe. We have a word in Bengali that says bileti begun, which is the tomato. It's the European bileti begun. It's a European eggplant, but it's the tomato. Tomatoes are not native to the Indian subcontinent. So most of the peppers and tomatoes that we see in today's Indian cuisine are actually not even about India and native Indian knowledge systems. So we have to think about all of these different phases that have affected Indian cooking. And remember that these are not part of the yogic system of evolution that we have had. The question that's listed next that you can see on the slides is, what is the role of meat and non-veg? And first, I want to say that when people say non-veg, they think they're talking about meat, but non-veg actually means that which is not a vegetable. So if you're eating chocolate and potato chips and macaroni and cheese for dinner, you might say, well, that's veg. There's no vegetable there. So vegetarian means an emphasis on plant-based foods that include the vegetables, the grains, the plant-based proteins. If you are using things in your cuisine that are not plant-based, then you can say, well, that's non-vegetable based. But in practice, non-veg seems to mean meats of fish, meats of animals. Four-legged animals, two-legged animals, large animals, small animals. And there's an entire chapter in Ayurveda about it. And when I say that, people say, what? I thought Ayurveda is such a clean science. What are you telling me that there's meat in Ayurveda? If you go to the Ashtanga Hridayam, which is one of the classic texts, now there are 54 legally recognized texts by the Indian law that are the legally true and we could say the Shastras, or the legally accepted knowledge of Ayurveda. And in those 54 texts, there are 6 that are considered to be the big 6. 3 big ones and 3 lesser ones, but nonetheless the big one, the main ones. One of them is called the Ashtanga Hridayam, and it comes in several sections. The first section is the Sutrasthana. And in the Sutrasthana, chapter number 5 and chapter number 6, they outline all the foods. And since I'm sitting on one slide, let me just show you what those look like. So Ashtanga Hridayam is the text. Sutrasthana, this is the way we abbreviate it, chapters 5 and 6. We start out first with water, and then we move to the different milks of plants, and then 8 animals. And then we talk about cow milk and how that evolves. And so we talk about cow milk, cow yogurt, and how to actually make ghee. We talk about sugar cane from ikshu, which is the cane plant, and also some of the others, like I mentioned before, dates and beets. We talk about honey as its own entity, but remember, honey is not vegetarian. It is the digestive, you can say saliva, that has been vomited out from the mouth of the bee and collected into the beehive. So it's a upchuck of the honeybee. So many people that are strictly vegan will not take honey. There are different oils, usually from seeds, alcohols that are fermentation products, and medicinal use of urines. We can talk about that. You know, Indians tend to find it easier to talk about because we had a president that used to use auto urine therapy, but usually Westerners don't like talking about it. And then we have cereals and grains, pulses and legumes, which are the plant-based proteins, cooked combinations that are considered to be great. And then here's the meats that I was talking about. So meats are certainly part of Ayurveda for medicinal purposes. Vegetables, fruits, salt, and then herbs like tulsi or amalaki, or some of the hingu, which is a resin, ginger, which I mentioned before. These are all considered part of the medicinal herb foods. So these are all ways in which we take these different Ayurvedic components and put them into context. So how does the way we prepare our food connect our guts with our deeper selves? That is where we talk about the qualities of foods and then the quality that translates to us. So if you naturally have negative thoughts, just observe what your diet contains. And if you have many of those foods that tend to have a lot of tamas, then it's possible that if you shift away from eating as much onions and garlic, shift away from eating meats, or grow your own meats, kill your own meats, clean your own meats, and then consume them. That is one way to take in meats and really gain compassion, because now you've taken a life and consumed it and understood the cycle of life. That wisdom that comes will naturally change the way people are conscious about meats if they eat them. And so Ayurveda has prescriptions for people to take you can say the chemical, physical part, but also the energetic part of every type of food and use it for your body's growth and benefit. And Ayurveda is very, very utilitarian. It says, if this works, do it. If you are completely emaciated after COVID or after some surgery and you need to build up your body, the best way to build up the muscle of your body is to have clean meat, animal meat. Ayurveda says that, and it actually prescribes it for many diseases. There are many ways to get that meat and different types and different seasons to eat those meats. But it absolutely says that you should be eating those if you want to build up your body. You can have as many sattvic foods as you want, but you are not going to be able to build up what your body needs unless you take in certain herbs or certain foods that will build up the mamsa, which is the Sanskrit word for the flesh of the body. So I wanted to start with these three words, as I said I would. These three words are the words that you need to understand around food that tells you about the philosophy that Ayurveda uses. Ayurveda talks about, first, I'll start with anna, because anna, even though many think of it as rice and grain, it means that which you take in, that which is nourishment that you take in. So if you're eating uncle chips, potato chips, which are, I don't know, not even potatoes, they're like some kind of potato product or starch that's shaped up into potato chip looking things and fried in some kind of unknown oil, that is not a really nutritious food. So that's not anna. Anna is that which has nutriments that your body can use. So that is anna. Ahara, which is another word for food. Ah is a long A. Ahara is that not only which is nourishing, but anything that's nourishing. So it can be food that is ahara, but if you take in love, if you take in a really good liquid, or if you take in something with any of your five senses, you see something really wonderful that's nourishing, you hear some music that's very, very pleasant for the heart and healing for you. All of those things are helping your body. It's helping your mind and your body and your senses and your soul to come together. And so all of that is ahara. The word hara means to give away. Ahara means to take in, to not give away, but to take in. So when we take things into our body, that's ahara. It can also mean cigarettes, it can mean booze, it can mean anything else that we take in. So that's ahara. Bhojin is the last word here. In Sanskrit, we would call it bhojana, because most things do not end in a consonant. They end with a little vowel at the end. Bhojana is a meal. And that meal is what you put together. It's those 6 tastes that we talked about. It's all those different components of plant-based protein, as well as a grain, as well as some vegetables. It is making sure that the 6 tastes, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, astringent are in there, but also things that you love. Things that you really enjoy are called swadu. And without that swad, without that desire to eat, your brain is not going to get triggered by what you see or smell. Say, I'm so hungry, I want to eat that. Let me send some digestive enzymes to be released down in the gut. If you're constantly eating because you're supposed to, but you're not really hungry for it, many people don't even gain weight properly. They don't gain muscle. But if they have that swad, that desire to eat, that what we can call as ruchi, interest in the food, then they will actually gain in being able to not only gain weight, but gain that needed component to make your body strong. I'm not concerned about whether or not you have weight. I'm concerned about what your body can do if you are nourished. how your tissues are in terms of strength, and how your body is able to use the nutriment that you have to do the work that you came here to do, whether it's having a baby or writing a book or creating a new company or running a miracle, sporting event, or doing some kind of manifestation of business. You need to have the energy to do that. And that is what Ayurveda tells you to focus on, so that you have or the food that you should eat should correlate with the energy that you need to focus on that purpose that you have for living. A couple of other terms that I want to make sure that you understand. One is the combination of patya, apatya. Patya is that which takes you on your path to wellness. Apatya is that which is not so good for your path of being healthy and strong. It will slowly decay what you have taken in, and it will slowly decay your body, because your body will say, I don't know how to use this. It's not good for me. It's not nutriment for me. And apatya is that which is just plain bad for you. So it's all those things that you do: not eating on time, staying hungry and not feeding yourself, overeating, right? It's so common in the West that if a little is good, more is better. So you just fill yourself completely. You don't leave air in your stomach after you eat some food and some drink. You don't leave that extra space in there. Having old food, having rotten food, having leftover food, having frozen food, having preserved food, all of those things are apatya, not good for you. So patya foods are really, really important for people that are trying to heal from serious diseases. If you have really bad skin problems, that's a sign that your gut is not clean and your liver is not clean. It's not about your skin. You can put as much stuff on your skin as you want. You need to heal your gut and what you're eating. Patya foods are important for these people. If you have chronic gut problems, yes, you need to focus on patya foods. And there's a whole science on each of those foods, and how you can figure out a diet for yourself after you do all these calculations of what is your gut like, what is your appetite like, what are your bowel movements like, what kind of cravings do you have, what kind of emotions do you feel after you eat. Are you very, very unsettled after you eat? Do you tend to be either overwhelmed, or do you tend to get angry? Do you lose your temper? These are all emotional lability, which corresponds to you not being grounded. Your food should be grounding you. If you eat and you feel fatigued, you feel you need to sleep right after you eat, there's a problem. You should have a little bit of your energy required to digest your food, but not so much that you need to sleep. So that's patya, apatya. Hita ahita is about being wholesome. So if you have an overall wholesome life, if you take everything you've done in the last 12 months and say, yes, I accomplished a lot of things and my body is stronger, better, healthier, right, than it was before. That might mean gaining weight, that might mean losing weight, that might mean keeping your weight. But did you have a wholesome life? Are you happier? Are you smiling inside? Are you happy with yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you feel that you care for yourself? That wholesomeness is hita, and ahita is the opposite. You didn't care for yourself. Kala bhojanam is the last term that I want to talk about, and that is kala. It's not just kala, the time, but it's knowing how to program the time and the place and everything you do around setting up eating. So it's the who, what, when, where, why, how of eating. If you can understand these things, and this is the who, what, when, and why, how, you can understand what metabolic risks tend to come up. And most Ayurvedic doctors are pretty sure that one of the biggest reasons that people have problems with their weight, they get things like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, is because they're doing their kala bhojanam wrong or not aligned with their own bodies. They're tending to eat much more rajasic and tamasic foods, and so the fire in their body is not under the kind of modulation that it should be. I know we're already close to finishing, so I want to just run you through a few slides that many of you will already know if you did take the conscious diet class with me, or you're part of the Bhattacharya master classes, or you've seen any of the talks that Indica has put on YouTube of previous work that I've done. as part of either Ayurveda or the Center for Ayurveda Studies. Here, actually, maybe before I show you this, I should show you some of the books, but I'll go ahead. This is about categorizing of different kinds of ahara. So Ayurveda says in every meal, you should not just have those 6 tastes that I talked about, but you should have 4 ways of eating. You should have something you eat, something you drink, something you lick. So think about the achars and the chutneys that every Indian meal has. And you should have something that you chew. So if you eat a lot of things like soft rice, that's just going to be put in your mouth and you can almost swallow it. You need to have something that you chew, that you actually need your dentation, your teeth for. They also talk about different types of cooking. So there's 7 types of that. They talk about different, we can say, components of what the food will do to you. So it'll bring you a life force, jivana, or it'll build up your tissues, brahmana, or it will scrape away residues, lekana, or it will break up either hard old poop in your gut, or it'll break up stones that might start forming, or foods that you ate that need to be broken up, vedana. It will pull parts of your body together that need to be, and it will dissolve parts. So dissolving is the vedana, and sandhanya is the pulling together. And dipana. Dipana means to kindle, or not increase, but kindle your fire so that you're able to digest very, very optimally to your body type. So as you learn different parts of Ayurveda, you have to learn all of these. So when some Ayurvedic practitioner puts together a food diet for you, they really need to incorporate these parts into what you tell them about your own lifestyle. And if you don't tell them, if you're not honest about it, you live some imagination about what you are, some fantasy of what you think you're supposed to be doing, and you don't tell them the honest truth, they're going to put together a diet for you that is completely not what you are. And that is not at all very good for your body. And you may actually suffer from that. One other thing that we have to put in, which is about the modern world, is not at all in Ayurveda, but is something that every Ayurvedic doctor will talk to you about. And that is the 7 deadly white foods. And they are salt, sugar, white flour, which is not the godhuma or the gehu wheat berries, but it's the processed white flour where they take away the germ and they just leave the flour part of it. And when they do that, the vitamins that are an integral part of that wheat berry are taken out, and they actually were found in the 1940s to create beriberi, which is a heart condition due to a lack of vitamin B. It's all, you can go to Google and search for this National Nutrition Conference. And the way that they solve this problem is not to stop taking the germ out of the wheat, but rather to put chemical amounts of B vitamins back in, thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin, and they call that fortified flour or enriched flour. It's some of the worst stuff that is actually harming humans, and that's why it's called deadly. White rice that is genetically modified and not drinking the same water that you drink, so you import it from far away rather than having local rice. Milk that is some kind of pasteurized, homogenized, processed, and not just from the cow, or you're having other kinds of milk like coconut milk and pretending. All of these things are deadly. And then eggs, if you eat them, and different kinds of oils. So it's very important that you learn how these foods are processed in your own locale, whatever part of the world you're in. And you learn where to find these 7 things that are the staples of your food world. If you can do that in the modern world, that usually takes care of so much of the problems. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides because this is how I actually teach more in-depth classes. One is from the dhanyas of the beans, the plant protein. So many of you have heard of either pulses or dal or beans, legumes. I've used many of these words so far today, lentils. So here's a picture of many of them. And what we did in our classes, we went through each one of them. And then we went into the Sanskrit text. And they say, if your digestion is not good, have mung. Mung is the best that you can digest. It's the easiest and it's the most healthy. Here it is. It's called green gram in English. It's called mung bean in pseudo English, Indian English. Moong dal in Indian languages, and Vigna radiata in the botanical world. The opposite of that, which is the worst that you can have, and it is the most unnutritious for someone that does not have a good gut fire, is the black gram, which is known as urad dal. It's the black one, which you can see here on the side in this pink rim bowl, and it has a white inside. So any of you who are from South India are saying, oh my God, I put urad dal in my dosa. Is that bad? It is if you're not good at digesting right now. You shouldn't be having a lot of urad dal. So what should you have? Have something without the urad dal. Don't ferment your dosa so much. Something like set dosa, or something that is not as dependent on urad. Or put like 1/5 urad if you're gonna. But many times, really what you need to do is just stop the urad dal for a while if you're not good at digestion. In between the moong dal on this side and the urad dal on this side are a bunch of other beans. And so we discuss these one by one by one. And you can see that there are actually 8-9 slokas that discuss dals in the Ashtanga Hridayam Sutrastan that tell you about the properties and which diseases they will cause if you eat too many of them, and which diseases will be solved if you eat some of them. Another example are fruits. So these fruits are called phala, and there are some 26 slokas about fruits. Some of these fruits are not available where you are, and some of them are. But overall, what they say is that the best fruits to have for like in general are pomegranates, grapes, and almonds and walnuts. So almonds you'll think of as a nut, but they're actually technically a fruit. And if you are in a part of the world where you can get actual coconut, that's very good. The problem is that if you are sitting in the middle of Toronto and you're getting coconut flown in from Kerala, it goes through irradiation and it goes through all kinds of chemical processing. That processing negates everything that's written in the Shastras about these foods. And that is one of the biggest problems that I have with Ayurvedic doctors who come from India to another land and try to counsel people about foods, but they don't realize that those foods are highly processed and highly, what can we say, altered, right? So with that, I'm going to answer some of the questions. And then if we have questions that are specifically related to some of these other slides, I will go into them. So the first question that I saw that was first asked was, what does food affect emotions, or do emotions affect food choices? And it's actually interrelated. So yes, there are foods that will affect your emotions. Think about someone that drinks a ton of whiskey before they eat. You know, I don't know if whiskey is a food, but it's something that's ingested and it will affect people. If people eat a lot of food that's very, very gassy, like cabbage or cauliflower or peas, or even very fried foods, they are not being digested because the gut fire is not strong enough to take it. And those foods will then give gas, and people will get very frustrated. Sometimes they get very sad. Sometimes they retreat from society because they're having all this gas. They don't feel the energy to partake in the activities, and then it affects their emotions. For some people, they just get up and they're just angry because their gut is so hot. You will see this in little kids. They will eat a food that they are not able to digest, and over time, they will develop an allergy to it. And when they develop that allergy, they will try in their nonverbal way to indicate to their parents or whoever's feeding them that I don't like this food. It's not making me happy. And you'll see them throw tantrums. And parents, you know, I mean, these days we don't have parents learning how to be parents very well because they're not living in multi-generational households where their grandparents would teach them. And so they do all kinds of things that they read in some book. And their kid is shouting and screaming at them that they don't want this food, and they're force feeding their kids. And what you see is that kids get food aversion. Sometimes they become anorexic or bulimic when they're in adolescence. They use food as a power thing to make their parents angry, to get back at them because their parents have fed them something that inflamed them, right? When you have inflammation in your gut, that's inflamed child because they're not getting fed properly. So yes, food does affect their emotions, and in children, you can see the reaction. The opposite question from Kiran Bhatia is, do emotions affect food? Yes, emotions do affect what you're going to choose. So if you're feeling very, very sad, and the way your mother dealt with your sadness, and she would feed you cake and ice cream, then you'll find yourself going for cake and ice cream. If every time something happened and your mother was trying to quell you, she said, okay, come here, honey, I'll feed you payasam. You might find payasam is rice pudding. You may find yourself every time you're sad going for rice pudding. So these are connected, and it's the entire cycle of your mouth giving a signal to your brain, going around your emotions and bringing down a signal to your digestive system that is so important for you to understand that everything is related. Modern medicine is just discovering this. And so sometimes I get, a little bit sharp and I say that modern medicine can be very infantile about food, because just 50 years ago, they were saying that food has nothing to do with your disease. And so people were eating whatever they wanted, and we saw what happened in society. So yes, do remember that food affects emotions, and the way that you eat foods, the processing of the foods, as well as the combinations do affect it. There's another question about what category does egg fall in? Eggs are hatched by chickens, right? I mean, they're chicken eggs, I'm assuming, or duck eggs. So it's poultry, and poultry eggs are considered part of the meat kingdom. They're a bird, so they are part of the meat kingdom. And so some people will classify them as proteins and meats. And in the Ayurvedic text, it's called Mamsa Varga. Varga means the family. Mamsa means meats, flesh family. That was Rajiv Agarwal's question. Nilakshi asks, so Nilakshi has been nice enough to put the 6 ripus, the enemies of the mind, which are Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada. I had missed Mada, Bhattacharya. So they've mentioned all 6 of those. Thank you to Nilakshi for putting those in. Samhita Bhattacharya has a question. I would like to know more about some people who can eat different types of foods but do not take energy, rather any negative energy. How is that possible? So this is a really great question. If you're a true yogi and you know how to filter out energies, you can be in an environment and not take the negative energy. You can filter it out and just say, okay, I choose not to take in anything negative. I'm just going to take the stuff that I need. Any student that's gone to university in India knows what it is to just take the lessons from the teacher, that is the actual teaching, and let go of all the other stuff that's politics or gossip or just untrue stuff. And when they learn to do that, what are they doing? They are seeding, right? They're filtering out what they need. You can do the same thing when you eat, if you learn how to do it. To do that, you have to be very much in touch from your mind to your gut. And people have asked me, how do I start doing that? What I know in my own experience is that if you wake up every single morning, and you have to start by just practicing from tomorrow morning. You wake up and you lay still and you ask your gut, hi, how do you feel? You let your mind talk to your gut and you really listen. Just do not engage with whoever else is in bed. Do not engage with your phone or with the sun or with anything. Just be with your gut and let that mind-gut relationship come forth again. It will rebuild because your gut is trying to tell you things. That's why we call it the gut instinct, or a gut knowingness. If you can develop that, then you can learn to reconnect how to eat different types of foods and only take in the goodness that you want to do. The Sanskrit term for that is vivecheti muncheti. It is discussed in the Ashtanga Hridayam in one line. Most of it is not discussed in any detail. You have to get that from your guru. So when my guru taught it to me, we talked about how the body learns to discriminate and how the mind learns to tell the gut how to discriminate, so that you know which foods to choose and you have an instinct about what to eat and what not to eat. I hope that's helpful. I know it's a big thing to learn, but usually the only way to learn these things is to learn it with someone live, sitting there, who can train you from where you're at. If they try to get overall knowledge, it's generic. But if they find you where you're at and can lead you out of your little rabbit hole and back into the larger sense of things, then you'll be able to take in that knowledge. Getting yourself out of that rabbit hole is the biggest challenge. So I'll move on to the next question. Which author version of Ashtanga Hridayam do you recommend? I actually recommend that you take 2 or 3 different versions and look at them, because I read in English. I also read in Sanskrit, but I prefer to take several different translations because no one I have seen is getting it exactly right. And so by reading different translations, I can assess which person's translation works with the Sanskrit word that I'm reading. I'm going to take a few more questions, Sophia, and then we'll stop. Kiran Bhatia asks, how do you manage the optimum ahara as shown in your slide in the current modern lifestyle? That's about learning how to do it. You have to really feel the qualities of foods, and you have to see where you're at. Some people are very, very advanced. They already know so much because their parents taught them when they were little kids. When you're 6 months old and you start eating your first solid food, that is when you learn how to take in food and know whether it is good for you, bad for you, harmonious for you, or not at all good for you. And some foods are delicious, but people, like little kids, don't like them. Generally, they don't like processed flour. But if the mom keeps giving them cookies and cake, they will continue to eat it, and they will learn how to eat it. Most little kids don't like candy bars, but if their mom continues to give it, then they'll learn when mommy gives it to them with a smile on their face, that's what they will eat. So as you learn what is good for you to eat from your childhood, from that time that you first start eating solid food to the time that your first baby teeth fall out, that's when you're imprinted. If your parents taught you, then you might be very, very advanced in how you understand food. If you're not, then you might say, I don't know if I like this food or not. And then you've got a lot more work to do. Then you can, once you figure out what those foods really are like for you and what they do to you and whether or not it works for you, then you can start building what's your optimum ahara for you. Most everyone can figure out how to sit quietly, where to sit, how not to have the phone or computer or TV on. But most people don't do it. They engage in all kinds of nonsense, even though they know they shouldn't be eating that way. There are some people that don't even know that they should eat quietly. Then that's their first step. So Kala Bhojanam is generally something that I start with when I teach people how to eat. Next question. Gosh, there's so many questions coming in. I really appreciate that you guys have so many questions. I'll just take a couple more because we're at the end of our hour. And one is, let's see, does chanting or singing while cooking affect the quality of food? Yes, it does. In fact, many people will put a picture of Annapurna, the goddess of Anna, and making you full or pure from it. Annapurna, they'll put a picture of her or a little statue of her in their kitchen, light a little fire in front of it, and pray to her as they make food, saying, may this food be nourishing for everyone that I feed. In addition to having her there, if you chant and sing in a positive way, with not like heavy metal, right? You know, some of those songs are like, oh, da, 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 I hate my so-and-so and so. Those kind of songs are not great for food cooking. But if you're chanting bhajans, if you're chanting Sanskrit mantras as you cook, yes, the vibration of that does go into food and it does affect it. I found that it affects not just food, but also medicines. So that was a great question for the person that asked that. One more question. Let me just see. Oh gosh, there's so many good questions. Thank you all for these wonderful questions. I'm going to take a question on oils from Neela Govindaraj. Generally on oils, aren't coconut oil, sesame oil good? So good is one of those like Christian Judaic terms. What oil is good for you is what you grew up with. There are people that grew up on mustard oil like myself, and it's great for them. There are people that grew up on sesame oil and they can actually consume it. But in general, sesame oil is sharp and it cuts through tissue and breaks it down. So it is not recommended to be eaten in large amounts, except when there's a lot of phlegm in the body, which is December and January. That's why we have til, which is the sesame seed, chikki and biscuits and all kinds of laddus and things in around the time of Makar Sankranti, because that is the one time when we have enough phlegm in our body that we can take the sharpness of sesame oil and use it. If you grew up in Kerala, you can have kera. Kera is coconut. If you grew up in a part of the world where there is no coconut oil, maybe don't have that. If you're in the West, what should you do? Think about what you grew up with. Many people grow up with either lard or olive oil or some kind of natural seed oil. If you're screwed because you grew up with canola oil or like some kind of, hydrogenated vegetable, palm oil or something really processed, you probably have gotten sick pretty early in life because those oils are not good for you. And then you need to work with someone to figure out how to undo that restlessness of your tissues because you don't have good oil in your tissues. Ghee has been found to be the universal good oil. Many people who are vegan don't want to have ghee, but generally what I say to them is if you don't want to have it, then don't ask for the benefits that ghee can give. And so I will start people on 1 drop of ghee a day and build that up to 2 drops, 3 drops, and move forward from there. So that's the last question that I took. And I love the fact that all of you have typed in so many questions. So thank you for that. And I will leave it to Sophia. If you want me to take 1 or 2 more questions or there's something else urgent, please let me know. Otherwise, I will say thank you for listening. And please do listen to some of the other lectures from the Indica series that are online. I have several that I have done for different vertical groups in the Indica family. Or you can just go on YouTube and see some of my lectures from the Bhattacharya masterclasses. Thank you for having me, Sophia. Namaste to you and
Dr.
to everyone.
Bhattacharya, you can take 1 or 2 questions more because we do have some very good questions. So we're fine because I know that you're pressed for time. You're at an airport, so it's totally up to you.
Yes. Do you have any particular questions that you saw me kind of flipping through the questions?
But I saw quite a few.
There's great.
The last one actually about probiotic foods, because there's a lot of this thing about curd and, eating probiotic foods, I think is a great question. Maybe we can combine a few questions.
I don't see the question, but let me talk a little bit about probiotics. So probiotics are those foods that are considered to have live bio, which is bacteria basically, in the foods. And every culture on this planet has some kind of probiotic food that's part of its, every old culture, every ancient culture. So it can be kimchi from Korea. It can be sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage from Eastern Europe. It can be curd, which is cow yogurt or sheep yogurt. In Greece, it's sheep yogurt. In other places, goat yogurt. In India, it's generally cow yogurt. We have the dosa, which is rice, which is fermented with a little bit of urad dal. We have, that's not just dosa, but it's also idli and uttapam and various South Indian foods. We have kanji, which is in East India, it is a fermented rice that has been fermenting overnight in an earthen pot. We have achar, which some people mistranslate as pickle, but it is the taking of spices and various really good digestives and putting them with a particular fruit like a raw mango or a vegetable or a citrus like a lime or lemon, and making a fermented food out of it, and then just having this much, like the length of your finger maximum, that much on your plate. So Indian cuisines, and when I say Indian cuisines, there's not just one, there's at least 30 different types of Indian cuisines. They all have some kind of fermented food in them. Why? Because probiotics are understood to be very beneficial. There's a chapter in a book called the Madhava Nidan. It's one of those 6 books I mentioned. And it talks about krimi. And when it was translated by the British, who wanted everything to be in English, they said krimi meant parasites. And the reason for that was that back about 100 years ago, they thought that the gut was completely clean and had no bacteria if a person was healthy. Like it would be pristine clean. Just like they thought the bottom of the ocean was full of sand. And then they discovered that there are these mountain ranges and there's these volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean. Well, there's also live bacteria living in your gut. In fact, there's 10 times more bacteria on your body than there are human cells. So when they discovered that, they called it the gut microbiome, and they started studying it. This is from like 2005. But before that, they thought that the gut was completely sterile. And so the way that they translated the word krimi from these ancient textbooks was parasite. But if you go back and you actually read it, what they are pointing to is that we have bacteria in our gut and we must take the real estate that they occupy and make sure they are healthy enough that some bad bacteria doesn't come in and displace that real estate. How to do that? Have a regular dose of that bacteria every day. So we talk about the lactobacilli and the firmicutes, and there's so many different like families or species types of good bacteria. If you go to the probiotic food that you grew up with your particular culture, that is the right one for you. So for me to go and have urad dal and dosa every day is not right for me because I grew up in Bengal. I'm really good with curd, cow yogurt made from cow milk, and then ghee made from that yogurt, not from the malai, but from the yogurt. I do really well with kanji, with rice. And my go-to food is a little bit of cooked rice that's just a little bit extra watery in it, with a little bit of ghee in it, and a little something on the side, like either some vegetable curry or maybe even some egg, because I grew up with egg. So I notice that when I eat that, that's my comfort food. I do not find hamburgers or chicken noodle soup or pierogies or sushi as my comfort food because I grew up a certain way. So you have to see what you grew up with and what probiotics were in your childhood. There are some people that say, I grew up with macaroni and cheese. My mother fed me McDonald's every day. Like that was our way that we grew up. I ate fast foods. So then you have to think about what kind of bacteria you had and whether or not you're healthy. If you're healthy, there's something that you were having that was probiotic. You just have to think about what it was. So probiotics are those bacteria naturally occurring in foods. And there are many. There are so many different types of dishes. So that's why we can't give a general answer. What's right for me is not right for Sophia, and what's right for Sophia is not right for you. There's another question here right above that says, when is the next conscious food class? How can we join online? And thanks to Kiran for that question. We were just discussing Hari Kiran, who I don't know if he's here yet. Hari Kiran is actually stuck in an office with some work, in a government office actually. So I don't know if he's written to you, but I think he's not available. So Hari was going to come in and talk for a bit. He's the founder of Indic Academy, and he has asked me to redo the conscious food class. So the same one that I showed you on the one of the first slides, which is called the Conscious Diet, Plant-Based Ayurvedic Nutrition. We're going to redo that class sometime. So we're just going to schedule it. And many of you, if you've been in that class, know Miss Dimple. So she will be with us. Otherwise, Sophia will be with us, and we will run the class. Again, we'll cover the same information, but obviously it'll be slightly different based on who the students are. Last time we had 125 people, and if any of you want to take it again, I welcome you back. And I also have a book coming out on foods that'll be out in the next, well, let's see when the publisher gets it out, but I've had a lot of fun writing it. It's about practical aspects to bringing routines into your life, including food and lifestyle. And we'll see how you guys like that book compared to the Bhattacharya book that was called Everyday Ayurveda. Any other questions that you saw?
I have a question actually. May I ask? It's about the pulses. So things like black chana, moong, is it better to have it at least a little bit boiled, or do we just soak it in water? And once it's absorbed the water, like 12 hours, can they be eaten raw? Which is better, or does that depend on the dosha?
It does depend on the dosha. If you have a lot of fire, you might be able to have some moong, but generally it's very heaty. They're very heated, because think of the fire that it takes to go from a seed to sprout up, right? So if you just soak the dal and then just eat it like that, like a seed, it's going to be a little bit heating for you. So that's why they say you should first take, so I'll say for moong, you should take it and you should just toast it on a dry pan, and then add some water to it, and then let it boil until it's mushy. That's how to make moong dal. And in there, I also take out that froth because it's the undigestible part. I always add some salt and haldi after the first boil. And then I decide what I want to add into it. Sometimes I'll add some radish, mooli. Sometimes I'll add some carrots. Sometimes I'll let it be plain and just add some dhania patra at the end. It depends on how you want to make it and what the weather is. If the weather is very, very wet and rainy, I don't make it as wet. I usually have it a little bit drier. In the winter, I love to make it wet. I love that extra moisture in there. So moong dal in and of itself has so many recipes simply because it is so healthy for you that you can make it in different types of climates and different weather, in the same place where you are, different seasons of the year. And so I recommend people to have it as dal. I generally do not recommend sprouts for people because most people do not come to me and say, I have really good Agni and I run 10 miles a day and I sweat enough and I'm so healthy. Can you just talk to me about how to do it even better? Most people that come to me say, I'm having problems digesting. I have a lot of problems with gas. I am not pooping properly. I have constipation. I have acid reflux. I have problems digesting certain foods. I have food allergies. I notice if I eat certain food, I break out here or here or here on my chest. Those are the kinds of complaints I get as a physician. And so I really emphasize people to not have all those other dals. And I really emphasize that they should eat things that are easy to digest. The Shastras say that the easiest things to digest for us all of the beans is moong dal. And that's why I recommend it. But not as a sprout, because a sprout is going to give you heat that you're not going to be able to transfer into fire. Remember, heat is different from fire. Heat is just vibration. There's a Hindi word, chanchal, right? So the chanchalatva is what you get when you have heat. It's just vibration of molecules. Agni is the transformation. It's a focused transformation where it takes something here and it digests it and it transforms it into nutriment that you can actually take into your cells and use as molecules. They're different things.
Thank you so much.
Clear?
It was. Thank you. That really helps because the moongs, I have a very, I try to eat a lot because also Pitta dosha. So I was told that moong is very good for me. And black.
But if you're Pitta dosha, wait 1 second. If you're Pitta dosha, don't be having a lot of sprouts. Okay. Don't be having moong sprouts or alfalfa sprouts or, all these bean sprouts because you're adding heat to your body. You don't want to add heat. What you want to do is add fire. You want to bring your pitta down by having the fire come and digest out all that residue that is creating chanchal heat in your body. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No,
what was the next part?
It's good. So moong basically before it sprouts, soaking after 8 hours, that's when it's good to go or less.
I would say soak it about 2 or 3 hours.
That's
Let it dry in the sun. Keep it dry. And then when you're about to use it, put it on a pan, toast it. Let it get hot so it'll dry out that extra coating outside, and then put water on it, come up to the first boil, take out the froth, and then cook it. And don't cook it in a pressure cooker. That will give you the best moong dal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya. Up to you. Do you want to take more questions? Because
what's your next
but I don't want to. I had just asked about black chana, whether we can have again just soaked or does it need to be boiled or better to eat raw? Because I know I'm not sure how good raw food.
Ayurveda generally does not tell you to take the pulses raw.
Raw, yeah.
It just doesn't. The only things that you can take raw are the fruits. Everything else, especially vegetables. Vegetables should not be taken raw. And the bean family are all part of the vegetable world. Why? Because when a plant is growing in the ground, it is saying, hey, I don't want to be eaten up. Let me put a little bit of toxin inside of me so that cow that's walking by doesn't come and eat me up so that I can survive to make another generation. And so most of the vegetables, especially the gourds and the beans, have a little toxic substance in them. The way that humans have learned to get rid of it is by cooking it, right? Bhoj right? Bhoj or pak means to cook it in fire and in water. That's what gets rid of that little toxin. And they found that, hey, if we do it this way, it'll get rid of this toxin. If we add turmeric, it'll get rid of the toxin. If we add cumin, which is a digestive. So these recipes that have come up in Ayurveda are because they realize that there are toxins in these vegetables. When people go eating these raw, number one, you have to have the fire to digest that toxin. If you cannot digest that toxin, it becomes poison for you. If you're very good, and the best way to do is to exercise every day. If you're running every day or bicycling every day or swimming or doing housework or, I do jharu pocha at my house. I will not hire a maid until I have the best digestive fire because that jharu pocha, right? Going around your house and doing all of that work actually builds up my exercise. And that's what I need in order to be able to digest all those toxins. So I rarely eat vegetables raw. And when I have salads, it's just so rare that I have salads, especially in those times when I'm traveling a lot, when my vata is high, or when I am in a place where, you know, I can easily like not get enough sleep, or I have a lot of work to do. My mind is racing through projects and projects. I know I need to eat things that are cooked and that help my fire to digest them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya, for so patiently answering all our questions. I really feel bad because we have so many questions, but you know, maybe you guys can also email the questions to us and maybe we can forward them to Dr. Bhattacharya. Would that be okay? You know, then we can go through some of the questions.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And maybe what we'll do, you're going to post this up on YouTube. Maybe what I'll do is I'll take the question and I'll put Q, and then I'll put the answer there. And that way all of you can enjoy it. Because I know several people have already asked for the link to this. And
that's true. These sessions are recorded because someone even asked the question, and they will be available on the Indica Yoga website. They will be available on the Indica Yoga YouTube channel, and they will be available on our social media as well. So please watch again, share, and you can always come back to this video for all the wonderful information that Dr. Bhattacharya has so kindly shared with us today. Thank you so much.
I hope this was useful. I know it was a little bit piecemeal for those of you who are Ayurvedic physicians who are saying, why didn't she talk about this? Why didn't she mention that? There are so many interesting things in the Ayurvedic food world. I do want to say, though, that Ayurveda is one of the only sciences that really has it together. I can use foods to help people heal from all kinds of diseases, which I can't do with my modern medicine toolbox. And the way that I can use the gunas of foods to complement the medicines that I'm giving them and the lifestyle. Like for some people, I will tell them, I need you to walk every day, or I need you to have sex every day, or I need you to hold the hand of your partner and go for a walk every day. These are ways of lowering the pitta. And for people who have pitta aggravation, I can't just give them food and medicine. I need lifestyle interventions. The way that Ayurveda integrates Ahara, Vihara, Oshadi. Ahara is food, Vihara is lifestyle, Oshadi is medicines like, you know, the pills that we take. The way that it does it is so elegant and so sophisticated that there are people that come out of disease states that just can't do it using allopathic medicine. And that is why, as an allopathic doctor, I went back and got that Ayurvedic training so that I can use this. And I'm just fascinated by how well it actually works. So if I forgot to say something that you really wanted me to say, please put it in the chat. We'll have it up on YouTube at some point soon. And if it's very urgent, then please write to Sophia and she will collect some of these questions. Sophia, I hope that you'll gather these questions that are here on this list. And
we're going to ask Kotiji, would that be possible?
Sorry, Sophia.
All of the Q&A that have been asked, would it be possible to gather those questions after this session?
Yeah, sure. I will.
So can you please send that as data? So there we go. We'll have the questions as well as the people asking it. So we'll make sure you get your answers. Thank you so much, Kotiji.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Bhattacharya, before we end this session, any last advice for everyone watching and for everyone who will watch later?
Well, since everyone is an individual and Ayurveda individualizes, I'll just say that become conscious of what you're eating. The first step to get someone like me to help you is to know what you're doing right now, honestly. And if you notice that you think you do one thing, but you watch yourself and you do something else, I used to put a mirror in front of me, like lean it against the wall and watch myself and eat with myself. And I would watch how I chew, how much I chew, and I would just watch my own company. Do I talk a lot? Am I on the phone? Do I tend to be watching something visually, like the cars going by outside in the window? What am I doing when I'm eating? Am I paying attention to the food that's right here? Am I smelling it before I put it in my mouth? Sometimes people get sick and they say, yeah, I noticed it then. Well, I was in a hurry, so I just ate it. You shouldn't be putting stuff into your mouth when your senses tell you, don't, you know, it looks bad, it smells bad, don't eat it. people need to become much more conscious of their food. And if I give people one rule, but this is the rule I give to my Western clients, I say you can eat whatever you want with one rule, because they're very afraid that Ayurvedic doctors are going to, limit them. I say, find out when that food that you're about to eat was last connected to the earth, either as a living plant or a living animal. Find it out, just find out. And then, so that, well, how am I going to know? Go find out from the SKUI code. Go find out from the farmer you bought it from. Go find out from the grocery store. Do some research. And when you realize that eggs in the grocery store are 6 months old, you will start going to the farmer to get your eggs. When you find out that that meat was actually 3 months old and kept in the freezer and then thawed out, you will stop eating that meat. When you find out that those vegetables have been sprayed with pesticide or covered with wax, you're going to make different decisions naturally, because your brain is going to say to you, why am I eating this? It looks good, but it's not good. And so just that one exercise is, I think, the advice I would give you. Just find out where your food comes from before you eat it. And you will start choosing wheat berries versus that Ashirvad flour or that, whatever brand flour that you're buying, because that flour has pesticides and wheat germ removed from it. You'll start eating local rice. You'll stop having RO water, and you'll start having gravity filtered water in a copper pitcher. All of these different changes will happen one by one when you become conscious. And that's what I love watching. And when people do it, they just transform their lives. Diseases go away, thyroid problems go away, diabetes changes, because they become conscious of what they're putting into their body. So that was a little long, but I hope that was useful.
That was so useful. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya. It's been wonderful, as always, to have you. Always learn so much every time we watch one of your talks. And also a big thank you to all of our participants for joining us this week. And I hope you join us again next week. We'll be sharing what's going to be happening next week on social media, as well as our website. We're going to have Dr. Mala Kapadia present next week. So there's a lot of good sessions coming up. So please stay tuned. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Namaste.
Namaste.